We have got to start with what's going on in Seattle. How you doing, bud?
Man, I'm doing great. But this Russell Wilson Seahawks rift is really escalated this offseason. And it was fully encapsulated and broken down in an article that appeared in The Athletic. And DJ, man, we just have to talk about some of the explosive content that came out of that article.
Yeah, it was really a great piece of reporting there by a trio of writers. I know Sando was one of them who was really dialed in with that team. And man, let's just kind of go through it a little bit here. It just talks about kind of how there's been this growing divide between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. And the best way I would describe it, and how it's described in this piece, really is Pete Carroll's belief in a philosophy of running the football, playing great defense, and believing in that formula. And Russell Wilson's belief in himself and wanting more responsibility, not just in terms of putting the ball in his hands on the field, but having more of a say-so in personnel decisions and coaching moves and the direction of the franchise. Man, it was something that it sounded like as things started to get a little bit rocky this year, it sounds like it might be as bad as it's ever been.
Yeah, DJ, I think it is as bad as it's ever been. And I do believe it comes down to that. Pete Carroll has won a bunch of games with a strict philosophy. He believes in running the football, playing great defense. He wants to minimize turnovers and really make the game all about the ball. Russell Wilson is a quarterback who believes he's a playmaker. He wants to see himself in the same category as Tom Brady and Pat Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, and those other great quarterbacks. And so you have a guy that wants to play one way and a coach who wants to play another way because he knows his way has led to a lot of success and championships. And so I don't know how this ends up, but it's very, very messy right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of other different things to get into here. One of the things I thought was fascinating is it talked about Russell wanting to be kind of in that conversation with some of the greats. And it talked about two in particular. Tom Brady, who's been associated with winning, right? All the Super Bowls. So you've got that kind of legacy that he's chasing. And it looked like he was kind of on track to be kind of that winner, right? He's in a couple Super Bowls, wins one early, should have won another one against Tom, but hasn't been able to get back there. Then the other name was Breeze because of all the stats that Drew's been able to compile over such a long career. So he hasn't been able to quite get the numbers of Breeze. He hasn't been able to quite get all the championships he would seek to be known as kind of the winner like Brady. And it feels like those two things are the difference in those philosophies because Brady won several of those championships because they had great defense, because they could run the ball, and because he protected it. And Breeze put up all those stats because they put the ball in his hands. It almost seems like they're stuck kind of in no man's land in the middle between these two things.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting about it all because Tom Brady is recognized as the GOAT because he's the ultimate winner, not because he has the most stats or because he has the glossiest resume when it comes to an individual playing standpoint, whereas Drew Brees is celebrated as a gold jacket guy because, look, he does have a ton of 5,000-yard seasons, but he doesn't have the wins of Tom Brady. And so ultimately, Russell Wilson has to decide, what do you want to be known as, the winner or the guy that has the big numbers? Because you can't have both based on the way that you have to play to attain those levels of success.
And I want to get a little bit to it on the Seahawks side of things because I think there's blame you could cast on both sides, on Wilson's side as well as on the Seahawks. To me, in order to play in the style and in the philosophy that Pete Carroll wants to play, great defense, run the football, to me, building a really good offensive line is a key part of that, being able to run the ball and be able to have that kind of physical identity. I think they've lost a little bit of their identity. And it's not necessarily for a lack of trying in terms of the resources. I know you can get into that and some of the resources they've put on that offensive line, but they haven't been good. They haven't been good up front. I know you can put some sacks on Russell, but I'm not even talking about the passing game. I'm talking about being able to move people in the run game and establish a physical identity. They haven't been able to do that. And I've said on here, we've talked about it forever, it's hard to find a great team with a bad offensive line. It's tough to do, man. And to me, it's also when you have a great offensive line, it's hard to be a bad team. So to me, I think fixing that, and I think Russell is, man, he didn't go out there, he doesn't just flippantly throw things out. You know it was calculated when he goes on national media shows and talks about them upgrading the offensive line. There's a source of frustration there. So I do give the organization a little bit of blame there. Again, not for lack of effort, but the offensive line hasn't been very good.
No, look, since they had that wonderkind draft where they were able to draft all of the defensive personnel, they haven't necessarily knocked it out the park when it comes to drafting in the early rounds. But I will say this when it comes to building out this team and what Russell wants. Like, it is very, very hard at times to pay quarterback top of the market money and have all of the other pieces around it. And so if you're really committed to doing that, then everybody has to kind of work and be on the same page when it comes to that. So maybe, like Tom Brady, maybe I don't take top of the market deals so I can ensure that maybe I can have some of the other things that I need to win. Some of that is defensive personnel, some of that is the offensive line. For the team, hey, Russ, we certainly want you to be recognized as one of the top players. We'll let you throw it around the yard, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty, when we get down to the playoffs, we're going to play the way that we need to play to win the game. Because that's also what we've seen the Patriots do when they had Tom Brady. Tom Brady may throw the ball all over the yard, but when it came to December and January, they played a certain style of football that you can close your eyes and say, oh, this looks like 1970s football. And so Russ has to figure out, what does he want to be known as? What is his legacy? To be the winner or to be the guy that stuffs stats?
Yeah, and Buck, when you go back to kind of how you build the team around a quarterback who gets that big second contract and is carrying a high cap figure, we talk about the fact that, man, there's more pressure on you in the draft to get it right because players are going to leave. You're not going to be able to keep everybody there. It's going to cost you some players when you're paying your quarterback that much money. All the more emphasis on being able to hit in the draft. We've talked about it with the Rams, right? They've paid their stars. They've got rid of a bunch of first-round picks. A lot of pressure on those guys, Les Snead and company, to be able to hit and continually hit on these players second, third, fourth, fifth round to be able to have some cheaper starters that can play at a high level. And I think with the Seahawks, when you look at them going forward, yeah, they want to address the offensive line. They've got no first-round pick this year. They've got no first-round pick next year. So if we're saying, okay, Russell might be trying to maneuver his way out of Seattle, maybe he peers out into the future and says, man, I don't know if this thing's going to get better here. And try and just drum up a narrative that makes it easily understandable why you're trying to leave. And he doesn't do it. Again, he's calculated, man. You don't go out there and say things in the public like he's said without me beginning to think, okay, he might not be doing it as Deshaun Watson has done it, to overtly come out and say, I'm not playing here. But it seems clear to me that I think he wants to get out of there.
Yeah, look, he may want to get out of there, but here's what's very interesting. The offensive coordinator bringing in Shane Waldron comes from the LA Rams. We've talked about the LA Rams system, which is an extension of the Shanahan system. I think it's a win-win for both parties. I think for Pete Carroll, it puts Russell Wilson in a structured offense that doesn't necessarily make the team rely so much on his individual playmaking ability. It's systematic. It creates open opportunities for the wide receivers. It should upgrade and enhance the running game, which is when Russell plays his best, when he's able to run the ball, throw off play action, and do some of those things. For Russell Wilson, the system gives him some comfort because there should be more consistency in terms of their ability to push the ball down the field, the home run shots, because I believe he's better as a vertical thrower than a rhythm passer. And so I think this certainly helps. I just don't understand now why Russ is so open in terms of voicing his displeasure. I do know that the money is coming due, and maybe Russ wants a little more money, but this is as messy as we've seen in the Pacific Northwest, and you can already see that the 12s are lining up behind their favorite ones. Some are with Coach Carroll, others are with Russell Wilson. I can't wait to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Real quick before we move on here, is there a team, if you're going to look at potential landing spot, if, who knows if this will happen, but if somehow they did come to the conclusion that they wanted to move away from one another here, what team would make sense?
Well, I mean, I think for Russell, I think maybe the Las Vegas Raiders, just because John Gruden loves his game, would put a running game around him. He does a really good job of doing those things. The only thing that I wonder, I don't know if their defense is good enough to supplant what is building in the AFC West, first with the Kansas City Chiefs, and then when you look at the LA Chargers. I think that would make a lot of sense. Outside of that, I mean, maybe New Orleans, but there are not a lot of options because if he goes to a team that is worse, are we confident that Russ can put a lesser team on his back and have better results than the results he's having in Seattle?
Yeah, it's tricky to me because I think when you look at the teams picking high, I think with this being a pretty good quarterback draft, I think they're going to lean more towards, even though Russell's a fantastic player, looking for somebody that can be their guy for the next 10 to 15 years. I don't see those teams up there. I'm talking about the Jets and the Dolphins. I don't see that. I don't see that happening. And then if you're the Seahawks, he might be a great fit with the Raiders and the Saints, but you can't give me a pick that can get me a replacement. Like I got to trot somebody out there to play quarterback. I'm getting rid of a top 5 type quarterback in Russell Wilson, and you can't offer me a pick where I can get my next guy. So I don't know. There's not an easy trade partner out there if this did come to that.
No, there's not one. So there naturally be some conversation. Well, what about Houston? What about Deshaun Watson for Russell Wilson? But I don't know if both parties have enough capital to pull that off. If you're the Houston Texans, you would certainly want some more compensation to come with Russell
You're trading
Wilson.
a 25-year-old quarterback.
I know. To come back for Deshaun Watson, I don't know. I think it's pie in the sky stuff. And I understand that Russell Wilson has a no trade clause. So where would Russ deem to be the best place for him? There are only a handful of teams in this league that are ready to go and ready to go win. I don't know if those teams also have a quarterback need.
The interesting thing, you said the Raiders real quick, is that I can make a case that Derek Carr kind of plays the game the way Pete Carroll wants to play the game. You talk about being able to protect the football, make good decisions, don't put your defense in a bad spot. That's kind of how Derek Carr plays.
DJ, you win a ton of games like that. We can say a lot of things about Pete Carroll, and I know people say, oh, but he didn't win before Russ. But let's look at this because it's it's a deal where they've been mutually beneficial in terms of style of play and what they built in those things. As long as you don't turn it over, you're going to win 9 or 10 games. Then it's on the quarterback to get you over the top. I think the Seahawks' frustration stems from the fact that since they've really entrusted the team to Russell Wilson and paid him the big money, they haven't been back to a Super Bowl. They haven't been to a title game. They haven't won at the highest level. What is the goal? The goal is to win it all, and they certainly haven't done that since Russell Wilson has become the ultimate playmaker for them.
Yeah, it is a really interesting story, something to keep an eye on. One thing we do know, if Russell Wilson does stay in Seattle, he's got some good wide receivers to throw the ball to when you look at Lockett, obviously with DK Metcalf.